Hello, guys, and welcome back to Paragliding Banter. This episode is a special one for me because I have a very special guest with me today. His name is Gurpreet Dhindsa. He's a very well known paraglider and a well respected person from the paragliding community here in India. He's been flying since 93, and in 93, he was flying sailplanes, and from 95, he's been flying paragliders. He has taken part in many competitions, paragliding competitions, over 60 of them, and has many podium finishes. He also runs the PG Gurukul Paragliding School in Bir and also has a cafe which serves some yummy kombucha, and it's one of his other talents that we'll speak about later. So please welcome Gurpreet Dhindsa to this chat. Gurpreet, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Sajid. It's a pleasure to be here.
So just for clarity, you are sitting in Bir, Himachal Pradesh, and I'm in Mumbai, and we're doing this over the phone, and seems to be working well as of now. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Cool.
marvels of technology.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, Gurpreet, I it's very difficult for me to call you Gurpreet. I usually call you GD. I'm going to stick to GD. Uh,
Okay.
GD, I know that you have done many interviews. If we Google you, there are lots of interviews and articles about you. So I'm not going to get into the same thing that people talk to you about competitions and the rules and laws and what we should do and what we should change. But today I want to ask you a very basic pertinent question that is um, a question that a lot of people come and ask me, or people generally have people who have just left the school and just started thermaling, and then it's all about flying and it's about the wing. You run a school, you run a successful paragliding school. You have students, you teach students, and then they graduate on to become great flyers, and you see them blossom over the years. And you yourself have flown all sorts of wings, from the basic school wing to a competition glider. So today the question is, what is the difference between different kinds of wings? And a follow-up question to that is, when is a person ready to move on to a next level of a wing, and what he should look for? I'll clarify on that a little bit more, probably expand a little bit more. For example, a person who has just left the school, has finished his P1, P2, P3, has done other courses, and he has done an SIV, and he's flying well. He's been, he or she has been thermaling, has been flying around, but at one point of time wants doesn't know when to move to a different wing. And the reason for that is we don't know what the other wing feels like because there's no idea. So could you just talk to us a little bit on choosing the wing? What characteristics do ENA, ENBs, high and lows, and Cs have?
I think first of all, we need to understand the certification system, the EN certification, or previously what was DH3 certification,
Right.
is that they test the recoveries of the glider. They don't test the performance or the handling.
Right.
It's only about recoveries, right? And that's why we have low ENAs, ENBs and high ENBs and now mid ENBs also, because recoveries are within the parameters.
Right.
The performance is different and handling is different. Handling could be sensitive or not. And also, the certification doesn't tell you how often the glider misbehaves, only tells you how it recovers.
Right.
So there is a lot of gap um, in terms of selection. Just the certification doesn't tell you enough.
Right. And also
But
the
that's, I think,
reviews,
another.
also the
Yeah,
reviews online. I
I
mean, they
think
tell you something, but
yeah, reviews, yeah, they tell you something, but you really have to consider the source.
right.
Because some people have made reputation with just reviewing equipment purely based on fact that they can afford to buy a lot of equipment and review it.
Right.
So you need to go by person's own depth and in the field and experience in the field, and then take the review. But more than that, I would trust the manufacturer's description itself more.
Okay.
But I think this is slightly off the topic.
Okay.
If it This is about selecting the wing.
Right.
You were talking about when to move on.
Right.
What I see in India now is too slow moving on.
Okay.
Um, People are just not moving on. And yes, I can understand. One, there's no way to test wings. I mean,
Right.
we don't have wings for
Trials.
just trials here.
Right.
And second is, I don't know, there's a culture being promote. I don't know whether it's being deliberately promoted. There's a culture. It's good to be cautious, but I think the Indian community is being too overcautious, and
Okay.
that's why you see um, there's a huge gap between who's flying CCC and then their new pilots who are doing well, but they're just not graduating there.
Okay.
So I don't know whether it's. It seems to some extent it seems to be just caution,
Okay.
which is good to some extent, but then at some stage it might hold people back also.
Right. So here's the thing that, like you rightly said, it is caution, and there's a lot of talk about safety. But the other thing is, I'm not denying that we need to be safe. Of course, we need to be safe, but
Yeah.
we also need to grow, right? We need to take certain
That's
amount of
exactly my
calculated
point.
risk.
Is that yeah? That's exactly my point. That caution is good, but at some point it becomes reluctance to move on also, and it's an inhibiting factor also at some point. So we need to strike a balance.
Right.
Uh, People need to grow. We need new comp pilots, and
Right.
it's not just about competing in the low end competitions and um, getting points. It's about moving on and coming to the open class also. Because now, let's see the World Championship this year. We
Right.
don't have people qualifying. I mean, it's sad that only me, Debu, and Vijay are qualifying.
Okay.
And nobody else even qualifies. So it's not even question of selection. It's just automatic. We have two
Right.
seats now. We might get the third seat in the next round. So that's sad. There should be some selection. There should be more than the minimum. Like three seats, three people qualifying is not good. There should be nine people qualifying, and then we can have a selection, and that
Right.
brings out competence. But
That's
this
true.
way,
But what do you think
so
about, let's say, sorry to cut you in short,
no, no.
just to get the right information from you. What
Mhm.
do you think about people who have just finished their school, and they have about 50 hours of flying, and they're flying the ENAs, and let's just say that they've just got to thermaling and understand it, and when do you think is the time for them to change, and should they change, move on to an
I
EN
think
or
whenever you learn something new, let's say you learn tumbling, and there's a point where you're learning, and then there's a point where you consolidating the skills. So your move to new glider should be in the consolidation part, not in the move to next step part, skill-wise. Personally, with my students, I never sell them ENA wings. I always sell them after they finish P3 with me. I ask them to buy low Bs
okay.
because simple reason the ENA doesn't want to turn, it doesn't glide very well, and we're doing thermic flying here in billing.
Right.
We need something that can maneuver.
So this is billing.
So for them, and then I keep them on top to bottom till I see that their handling, particularly pitch control, is very good in thermal.
Okay.
Then I let them go. For me, before person thermals, he should have very good pitch control
Okay.
and relaxed with deflations. He should have had one or two deflations already, the natural deflations.
Right.
And then I take them to a little bit cross country. Also accurate landing. If they're not landing accurately, there is no point going
Mm.
distance because
Right. Is
they're
that
going to be
primarily
landing.
because it has more energy than an A?
B I recommend because it turns better.
Okay.
With the weight shift, it responds better. You can keep it in a thermal without tiring yourself.
Right.
You can thermal with A, but it's mostly with the brake.
Right.
It doesn't respond so well to the weight shift.
Right. So
So
when you said consolidation, what do you exactly mean by consolidation for a
that
pilot to
okay,
move on?
it's like this that I generally have with my students. I have phases when I'm teaching them.
Right.
Then they're doing on their own, but I see that they're making mistakes. That's second part. The
Right.
third part is when they're doing it right and by themselves, and I'm just watching and being happy without letting them know that I'm happy for it.
Right.
So,
Okay. That we know about you. Yeah. It takes time to recognize
so
that,
that's
but yeah.
the third part where they're doing it on their own.
Okay.
instructor or whoever is coaching him is happy with how it's going, that is the part where they can move on to the next step, glider. What I mean to say is that you should not have just started thermaling with the NA
Right.
and you move on to B. If you move on to B, go back to doing top to bottoms for a few days.
Okay. That's a good suggestion.
Not the
Because
previous
you
stuff
want to
where you
know the
are very
glider.
comfortable. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, know the glider.
Right.
Do some pitch control exercises, do some roll exercises,
Right.
try small asymmetric, that kind of thing.
So from what I'm hearing from you, you really pay a lot of attention on the movement of the glider and the pilot's
Yeah.
ability to control that and be comfortable in the air about it. So
Yeah.
whether it be pitch or
The
roll.
most likely mistake that happens in thermaling is glider pitching too much and getting a big asymmetric because you're turning anyway. So
Right.
it's going to be asymmetric. It's not going to be symmetric.
Right.
So pitch control is very important at that stage. But at any stage, now we can same extrapolate it to going from B to C,
Right.
and that would be different level altogether. And then from C to D
Right.
and D to competition class. So what I mean, whatever stage you are at,
Right.
then you take a step back and change the glider, take a step back, be comfortable, and then again move on forward.
Right. So when I changed from an A to a B, uh, I the first so a few years ago, the first thing that I noticed was that the glider would dive in a turn. Like an A
Right.
would turn flat, but a B would dive and then get out of it with that energy. And I really enjoyed that. So I can imagine what you're saying in a thermal for somebody who is flying an A, goes on to a B and goes into a thermal. I can imagine
Yeah.
the suddenness of the dive for
Actually,
the
from A to B is quite straightforward in the sense that A, because of bigger cells and more drag, it
right,
doesn't pitch forward much. So
right,
you don't learn pitch control much on A,
right.
and that comes into play only with the B. So that's something you have to learn first
Correct.
before you
So
take
that's
it into
something new
common.
that you're exposed to on a B, and you need to do few top to bottom flights just to understand that.
Yeah, true.
That's a good thing. I also want to add over here, GD. I've said this many times, but for our viewer, for our listeners, I once attended your theory class. We happened to come there for our certification, and we attended your theory class somewhere in Bilaspur. And I have to tell you that it was the best explanation that I have ever got, a clear understanding. So, guys, anybody who wants any theory classes and clarity, you can get in touch with GD, and I'm sure he'll be happy to, you know, support you on that, and
That's
you can
kind of
get
you.
a few of his classes online or buy them online, maybe one on one. Okay, so GD, my follow-up question on this is, what difference do you see in thermal handling of a pilot who is probably a competition pilot versus somebody who is in a high end B glider? What nuances are there? So would it be like when a pilot moves from an A to a B, where A does not dive so much or does not pitch so much, and suddenly you have a glider B which is more agile and helpful in a thermal? Would that same thing apply to a high end B? High end B to a C.
Um, I think from B to C, it's more performance gain, not that big a difference in handling.
Right.
There are consequences. There are what you give away is a little bit more stability,
Right.
like more likely to cravat on C than B.
Okay.
If you get things wrong, if you're heavy-handed or something, and B won't do that. Particularly low Bs won't do that
Right.
because the higher aspect ratio and stuff like that. But there is handling wise is not. In fact, when you go from B, this is the difference. When you go to A to B, you feel nervous because B feels little out of control.
Right.
When you go from B to C or from C to D, the glider
Right.
actually feels better.
Okay. Really?
Particularly when you go from C to D, yeah, glider feels better. Or even go from D to CCC, glider feels better. It feels more responsive. But they are unforgiving in the terms that your reaction has to be right.
Right.
Earlier it was forgiving, that even if you don't react, it still has some inherent stability. When you go from D to C, like I said, not much different. But going from C to D
Right.
or to CCC, your reaction has to be right at right time.
Right.
There is no room for panic, sudden, abrupt
Right.
controls or over controlling, particularly over controlling.
Right.
Particularly CCC wings, they don't like to be checked too much. If you are
Mm.
heavy handed on brakes, then forget it. Don't go to CCC.
Right.
Then your touch needs to be very light, but at the right time and
Right.
right. So small, like you hardly see competition pilots moving either in the harness or with the brakes because all it's taking is a squeeze on the brake. It's not taking like a whole movement of your arm.
Right. It's more sensitive.
More sensitive. But the input, if it's wrong input, it will be equally unforgiving also.
Right. Right.
So it reacts, but then your input has to be right. It's not taking into account, the designer is not into taking into account the wrong input by the pilot at
Yeah.
that stage.
Yeah. Because
So that's
by
the difference.
now you have to have your active piloting skills and
Yeah. And particularly, you should not have any panicky reactions.
reactions. Yeah.
That
So,
those are not forgiven at all. In fact,
so
most of incidents in sea are also due to panicky movement.
right. So lots of SIV, lots of time in the air, lots of dynamic movements,
Yeah.
flying in various places, getting used to the pitch
But
and
I mean,
roll.
all these are good, but also what helps is clarity of thought, and
Right.
that comes from having the right concepts. Currently I see some people who have done a lot of even SIVs, but not getting there. Why? Because at some fundamental level, some concepts are not right. And that kind of builds itself, it multiplies as your habits kind of form up. So that clarity of basic thoughts is also very important because that eventually forms your reactions. What the
So,
models you have in your brain
right.
about the glider behavior is going to define how you're going to act in an emergency.
Right. But
So
I would imagine, GD, like at least that's what I do, is um, the reaction or the general handling of the glider in thermals is automatic, right? I
yeah,
mean, and then you're looking around to see what do you do now, who's flying next, who's getting a better climb, or is there any bird around? We're not really paying so much attention to.
but even our subconscious is it's driven by the models we have in our brain.
Ah, that's a very good
How we
point. That's a
simulate, how
very
we
good point.
think about before the shit happens, how we
Right.
simulate कि अच्छा ये मेरे साथ होता मैं क्या करता, and that is driven by the model you have in your brain.
Right.
And that
Right.
kind of builds into your subconscious. And if your model was wrong at some point, you will be driving wrong. And you think you have resolved it, but actually you haven't because the basic starting assumption was wrong. That's the thing with physics they teach you is that if basic assumption was wrong at the beginning, then the whole thing is going to turn out something else.
That's a very, very important point. That's that gives
Yeah.
a lot of clarity. So if you don't pay attention to your basics, you will build on something which is
I,
going to.
sometimes people tell me, "Oh, I'll do basics somewhere else, and then I'll come to you." And I generally find that uncomfortable
Right.
because I feel then you continue there. It's like I don't want. It's not about business, but then you continue there because same kind of thought pattern. Something for me, then to repair or to change something gets difficult because I don't even know what's built into this guy's mind now.
Right.
What model he carries there.
Right.
That gets
I
difficult.
yeah. This makes a lot of sense now. So, um, the exams that you give and the reading that you do, that's very important to really understand and
Yeah.
and put that in practice and really see if that really works. For example, like the weather. I've been doing the
Mm.
weather for some time now, and because
I'm
I got
getting pretty
fed up.
good with it now.
Sorry.
I feel getting pretty good with it now.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it because I got very upset with the fact that every time I would go to the takeoff, and everybody would give their own views on weather, and they'll be super confident about it. And out of five views, one view would work, and they would say, "See, I told you." And what was the basis of that? So I went down to the basics of to really understand what the hell is going on over here. And now we predict pretty much very close to what's really going to happen, and not only at the takeoff but the vertical phase also. I really, really appreciate what you've just said, and it's extremely valuable. We need to get our basics right, and we have a subconscious. And when things go wrong, if the subconscious is wrong, things in our subconscious are wrong, then we are going to react in that way. That's brilliant. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
All right.
So
So
yeah,
so from the we did from B to C, and you said that its handling is almost the same. It's just that the performance increases. Uh, I would like your viewpoint, since you have flown all over India and since we're doing primarily for the flying conditions in India. Uh, all the places in India are hot except for Beer Billing, where it is cooler, and the thermals are much bigger, stronger, wider, and pretty in springtime pretty strong. What would you think about the flying styles in different conditions of India? Primarily three places, just for our listeners to understand. First one being Beer, the same pilot flying in Beer versus flying in Kamshet versus flying in Panchgani. What would your thoughts be on the thermal quality and the air quality there? Do we need
I
a
never
different type
thought
of
about
flying
it
for
this
that?
particular way. Um, I mean, what is required, you mean, in skill waiver, or
Yes,
how the
yes. What do you
would
think
be
that?
over
See, I'll give you a little bit more explanation on this. What happens is we fly in Kamshed all the time. We have high winds, we have broken thermals at times, we have slanty thermals. Then we go to Panchgani. Panchgani is stronger, punchier thermals, also sometimes strong winds. And in Beer is completely different for us. It's almost nil wind at times and stronger, straighter thermals, and sometimes pretty strong ones too. So our flying changes subconsciously somewhere to these things to adapt.
yeah.
What's your view on that? And
See,
depending on the
let
glider you're flying.
let me first make a simple statement here is that good pilot would be one who flies at maximum number of sites,
Right,
because each place has its own things to teach.
right,
Billing teaches you something, Kamshet teaches you something, Panchkani teaches you something, and like even these three doesn't cover all. You might go to Macedonia, find different conditions. You might go to Bulgaria next door and find different conditions.
right.
So maximum number of sites flown is the best option. Um, Generally, people ask me what's your favorite site, and my answer is generally the new site.
Right. Okay. Because you get to learn. Yeah,
because
that's a good answer.
because it's easy to figure out one site and become expert there only, but then to go somewhere and figure out a place
Right.
by looking at it and nailing it, that is the real
Right.
challenge, or that's the thing that gives me pleasure. Is like, oh, I nailed it.
Right.
So each place, like billing, will get you. I'm starting north to south, not no preference as such. Billing will get used to what, let's say, thermal flying books tell you about where to find trigger point.
Right.
Thermal are more or less more vertical. They don't move. They are from the trigger point only.
Right.
Normally clouds form. It gives you good judgment of development of clouds, because a lot of days with overdevelopment, and it lets you go big distances, because ridges are perfect
Right.
glide distances away, right? So it's everybody knows why billing is good.
Right.
Landing wise, you have to get used to smaller landing, surprises of power lines,
Power
and
line.
bigger steps.
That's right.
So all those things you learn here. Kamshet, you have very small height difference to find the thermal in, or to save yourself with ridge lift, so you become
Yeah.
efficient there. It will learn you learn about better about flying at the minimum sink rate, let's say, which
Right.
you seldom care about in billing.
Correct.
You get better with efficient turns, and you need to you learn how to separate the feel of ridge lift from thermic lift,
Right.
which you don't learn in beer, right? Uh, Panchkani, I think that way is more challenging, because it's rougher thermals,
Right.
and sometimes different wind in valley, different higher up,
Right.
very leaning and moving thermals. Um, Sometimes convergence lines, which makes it too strong also. So all those things are different there, and also the temperature feel. It's when it's colder wind, you tend to be more sensitive to wind speed, and when it's warmer wind, you don't learn to judge it so well.
Right.
So each place is teaching you something.
So you fly more, and
Uh,
you're absolutely
yeah,
right because
best would be my recommendation to pilots would be to fly as many different places as
right.
possible,
Just grab the
and if
opportunity to fly new
possible,
places.
yeah, get the opportunity to fly at new places.
That's right. You're right because my the breakthrough in my flying happened in Bali, where everyone says it's a very easy site to fly. But I learned a lot in that those strong
Yeah,
wind conditions, and although it's laminar, but still, I learned a lot. So yeah, you're right. So the more you fly, the more different conditions you fly, the more you learn,
yeah.
and you
I mean, people might have like we can compare two pilots with 100 hours, and if they just flown one site in 100 hours, that won't be as good as person who has flown five
true,
sites in 100 hours.
true, that's true.
And we should have flown five sites in 100 hours. That's my recommendation.
Yes, that is perfect. Didi, we learned a lot in this small chat on which wing to choose, how to choose, when to move on to a higher wing, and the different flying styles that you suggested, and finally that we need to fly different sites to get better, and like you said, your favorite site would be the new site that you fly. So thank you so much for all this valuable information, and I really appreciate you coming online and having a chat. This is not the only chat that's going to be. I'm going to bother you again, and I'll get you on with
You
more other chats so
also.
that we can get into your mind more. And really, thank you very much. Anything you would want to add?
No, thank you very much. It's a great initiative. Keep it up. I mean, Flying Stories was a good initiative, and now this
Right.
is another good initiative. Yeah, more knowledge sharing is better. It's
Yes.
brilliant. Good.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Judy. I really appreciate it. Bye bye.
All right, sir. Bye bye.